Okay. Sorry, we had a bit of a false start there for a moment. So going back to the venue revenue streams, which is the second part of Module 5. Revenue comes from many different sources in terms of events and regular matches. So it comes from private enterprise or private individuals, comes from the public and private environments. Some of those private funding sources include donations, inline contributions, so contra, naming rights for the ground or for a particular day, concessions and concession exclusive rights, food and beverage rights. These things are very important in terms of selling food and beverage and allowing regular providers of that service to do that, whether we manage that ourselves or whether we get other people to do that. Restaurant rights, if it's a big enough facility and it has those types of venues within the major venue itself. Obviously, sponsorship packages are a very important part of it. Lifetime plan giving, so people who are going to donate if they pass away or anything else as a bequest or something. And lease agreements, low season, out of season, things that we can do to generate additional income. Obviously, the sale of luxury suites and skyboxes, premium and VIP seating, personal seat licenses, parking fees for those grounds that have good areas available for parking. It's quite a good revenue raiser on the day of an event for people to be able to park very conveniently for the ground, and we can charge obviously for that service. Obviously, merchandise and memorabilia revenue can be quite substantial if we've got a major team and people want to be wearing the gear of the people that are playing. Obviously, advertising and signage rights around the ground, vendor or contract equity, so contractor finance construction perhaps, box office and tickets. Media revenue can be very, very large amounts, as we know, with sports like cricket, AFL, soccer, rugby league. The broadcast rights in the end ended up well over $1 billion, so they are substantial. And obviously the license fees for endorsed products and other things. And if all else fails, maybe we can raise some money via debt. So looking at these donations and sponsorship, we'll go through each one of these just very briefly, but generally cash donations are only given when the donation is guaranteed to be tax deductible. And that's very important when you're giving it to a sport or something like that, or a school building fund or something that allows you to get that tax deductible benefit. Most large organisations have rules and procedures dictating donation and giving requirements. And obviously with salary caps and other things in some sports, that's going to have an issue as well. In-kind or contractor or contra, the donating organisation provides products or service to the recipient rather than donating cash directly. So they might provide some building services or something like that. And in exchange for that, we give them VIP seating for several games or something like that. So there's this trade-off or contra that we use. It's generally done when the donating organisation wishes to support a non-DGR recipient or wishes to inflate the value of their donation. This occurs because the cost of the to produce the product or service is less than the retail value. But still, if we get what we want as a club, that works for us as well. In terms of naming rights, obviously we've got Telstra Dome, we've got Vodafone Arena, we've got Skills Stadium. We've got also sporting leagues and events, the V Festival, Pura Cup, Red Bull Air Race, X Games in winter sports. And generally these are time-based, so that the naming right only lasts for a certain number of years. So you'll notice recently the Australian Open, Kia is still a sponsor of the Australian Open, but that would be up for renewal each year. Generally, we give the current sponsor first choice, but then eventually we will go to the marketplace if the price is not met. Bankwest Tower was originally the Bond Tower, and Sydney's Olympic Stadium has gone through several naming changes over the last sort of 17 or 18 years. In terms of concessions and food and beverage, this again is a very potentially important part of our revenue stream. In terms of concessions and other vendors, maybe a semi-permanent type of situation with a van or a roaming vendor's cart. This might be week to week, monthly, quarterly, might be yearly access fee to get to our patrons. But internal food and beverage sales, whether we do it ourselves and profit loss depending on the success of it, or the lease operation and the lease fee. Now, you'll notice that there is a fair bit of grief about these things. There's been problems in the papers over the last couple of days about the problems with the new stadium in Perth, where the quality of the food and the price they're charging is just not comparable. Charging sort of $15 for a burger, and it looks like it costs 7 cents to put together. And so you do need to be careful with this, both if you're doing it yourself or if you're getting an operator to do it for you. You must maintain the standard because it reflects back on the people who are running the event, and that's a problem. If it's a lease operation, we may charge them a lease fee, and as I've mentioned in previous things, we might actually look at their sales volume and charge them a percentage of the sales as well. If it's a restaurant, again, we can run it internally, we can lease it out, or we can have sort of one-off sale fee and a match day premium for external ownership. In terms of merchandise, for licensed products, shirts and programs, same as concessions and food and beverage, you've got to be careful how you manage it. We can do consignment sales, we can do co-branding with our sponsors or with others, and the same with merchandise, we do the same thing. In terms of premium seating, there's a couple of different options available depending on the type of facility that we have. Obviously, skyboxes, private area generally includes a specific number of tickets to each event, but also generally includes on-demand catering for food and drinks. VIP club membership, access to a VIP or a limited membership area with superior and extra services, and then personal seat licenses. Purchase the right to a specific seat, must still buy tickets to attend the event. And then season tickets, access to the venue for the entire season. Interestingly enough, with the Sydney Olympic Stadium, they offered 30-year seating as part of a gold membership. And I think it was, from memory, something in the vicinity of $5,000 or $10,000. But that gave you every event that's at the Sydney Olympic Stadium for the next 30 years and gave you a choice to, and they send you out a thing. I'm not a member, a friend of mine was, send you out a thing, say, do you want to go to the State of Origin Rugby League, or do you want to go to the a Wallabies test or whatever, and then you would be allocated seats. Parking, as I mentioned, can be, for those facilities that have good parking facilities nearby that they own, whether it's an open field or a multi-storey car park, you can do ticketed parking. You can also have private parking for those who want to be parking actually very, very close to the ground, and you can charge them a very high premium for that. And then you've also got to allow for bus and coach bays. Also, of course, parking services, valet parking, drop-off and pick-up services and things like this. I mean, we're talking major events before we get to this type of thing, and whether we manage it internally or whether we outsource it is something, again, that we would need to decide. Advertising fees, graphics and signage, who pays for the production and installation of the sign. Generally, an advertiser will want control over, to a certain extent, control over the content, but the people who own the facility would also want to have an approval of that information before it was actually put to sign. You can use big screens, and of course we can get roll advertising through them on a daily or an hourly or minute by minute basis. We can have pop-ups and banners and other things on those things. In-event video advertising in breaks of play and everything else works very well, and it's again generates substantial amounts of income. On-field or end zone advertising. With the Super Bowl next Sunday, I guess it's probably appropriate we should talk about the end zone. But these are American-based slides, and so they're talking about that. But we see this now on grounds where they actually paint information on the field, sponsors information on the field. I do remember a funny time when I was CEO of New South Wales Baseball, when we were running the Claxton Shield, and the boys from Blacktown Olympic Park spelt the name of a sponsor incorrectly, and had to wash it all off and redo it. So it was quite a funny and very fast repair, about 10 minutes before the people were starting to come to the ground. Obviously, staff uniforms can have sponsorship on them, and temporary displays and other advertising, and allowing people to have pop-up stores at grounds on game day and that sort of thing is also worthwhile. In terms of the box office, it's major revenue, obviously, for the number of tickets that we sell. We normally would handle this in-house for small local facilities. We've got then control of ticketing procedures and revenue, software required, physical box office and staff. Alternatively, we can use facilities like Ticketek and Ticketmaster 7 and these people who will take a percentage of the sales ticket. Sometimes they will add it on. So if the normal ticket is $50, they'll charge $55 and they'll do it that way for the convenience of them. The beauty of it, of course, with these online systems, you can actually print your ticket with a barcode on it. It can be scanned at the gate, and so that works well. But also membership sales that allow for regular seating as part of that offer. Some of the box office consideration, how you're going to do your seating plan. You think of when you go to a play or a movie, the years ago there used to be sort of, you'd pay a higher price to sit in the certain parts of the theatre and everything else. You certainly do, want priority when you're booking tickets to a concert or something like that. If you can sit up the front, it's a lot different from sitting in a concert hall when you're 20 feet from the artists or the band, from when you're nearly 70 metres away and watching it on a big screen. It's a completely different environment. And occasionally I've had that opportunity to sit much closer to the stage, and it certainly makes the experience completely different. So you've got to manage your seating plan, the ticketing system, the software. Whether you outsource the ticketing is probably a more likely thing for large events. And you may have general admission and then reserve seating. And these days, you've got to provide card services, but nearly every organisation is able to do that today with sort of minimal interaction with their bank. Types of tickets, obviously, general admission, reserved, season tickets, mini-season tickets. I know some of the rugby league clubs in Sydney offer, 5 games of your choice sort of thing. If it's an individual event, then generally, if it's a major event, there will be a premium charge for tickets. Because, it's a one out. Sometimes we have to provide complimentary tickets. Sometimes we provide free tickets to sporting events for kids to encourage them to bring their parents along. And then obviously you've got to deal with the press, students, and maybe a rain check. If the event is called off because of bad weather, whether you give people a refund of their ticket or whether you give them a ticket to do something later on. So typical seating arrangements, and all of these things come into it. Obstructed seats where you pay a lower price, when to release the house seats, if you keep some back, just in case you've got VIPs that suddenly want to come along and this type of thing. And then how you deal with complimentary tickets is another thing. And for some events, of course, maybe we provide standing room, and that might be another sort of small revenue area that we may be able to get some substantial amounts of money for. In terms of broadcast revenue, television, big money for major sports, there's no doubt about that. Radio generally doesn't pay broadcast fees, but it may pay an access fee to use the audio-visual gear and all the rest of the gear that's there in a particular room. Media access fees. Media may pay fees to access the media rooms and other media support services after the event. Certainly during the Olympic Games, individual media groups had to pay for access to the media centre where they could take video feeds and other things to send off to the many thousands and thousands of different organisations that wanted information that they could put into their television shows and news shows on radios and everything else. Only larger events and sports attract media attention, and only very large ones attract broadcast revenue. So debt financing, I'm not suggesting that most sporting organisations would participate in this, but obviously using savings is part of it to finance an operation. You can use loans, but loans are normally used to do something like to build onto a stadium or something. So if you're putting in a new stand that'll seat another 10,000 people or 20,000 people, we might take a loan for that based on the fact that with an extra 20,000 people being able to come to our games, and if we think we can fill that every week, every home game, we'll get the ability from that extra revenue to be able to pay back that loan. In its simplest form, I can tell you many years ago in a tennis club that I was a member of, we wanted to put lights in, and we, about four of us went guarantor at the bank to borrow $14,000 to put the lights in, and then we leased the courts out about 4 nights a week, and we used them for club play the other 3 nights, and we paid for the lights in 1 year. So you know, you can use loans for that purpose, but we shouldn't be using loans for just operational activities. We should use it only for expansion of the organisation. And of course, if you get to the stage where you can't afford to pay your bills, that means you're trading insolvently, and that's illegal in Australia. So you need to be very careful with that. Larger sporting organisations and you know, like the AFL and the NRL, and these people are very wary of their clubs getting into financial difficulty, and some of them have, and not that recent, not too far ago. Some of the other mechanisms for financing debt, you can use bonds, full faith and credit obligation. A bond gives someone a right to you know, take up or has a debt, and it's paid back at an interest rate, and then eventually, you know, they get their full amount of capital back. You can use non-guaranteed ones, revenue bonds, tax increment bonds, certificates of participation, all sorts of asset-backed securitisations. It's really beyond this course to be doing too much on this stuff. Some public revenue streams, obviously some certain tax adjustments that we get grants from the government to do certain things, particularly large organisations, large sporting organisation gets grants to, you know, maybe of millions of dollars to upgrade their facilities and other things. But then there's also things like taxes and other things that need to be paid. And then there is restaurants that we can have, but also what we call sin, cigarettes, alcohol, gambling, and perhaps not prostitution, but, you know, some public revenue streams, certainly in alcohol and gambling now coming into sport big time. Traditional public revenue sources for venues, grants and disbursement, tax concessions. Sporting groups are generally not for profit. Therefore, any money they make is just held for disbursement to grow the sport and everything else. Sports that are making a lot of money, and that varies from sport to sport and from season to season, I think sometimes. They do not pay tax on the money that they make because it's really not, you know, sent out to anybody else. It's used to keep running the organisation. But they are audited and they need to be checked. Deductible gift recipient status, charities and sporting trusts in Western Australia only. Tax deductions, investment in infrastructure, preferred industries is film, foreign investment. Perhaps we're getting into areas that, again, probably not got much to do with local sports and even some of our larger sports. Quasi-autonomous non-government organisation, Quango. So public ownership, private management, where the council might have a facility and they let, and Aquatic Centre is a good example of this, where they let a management team come in to manage that facility. We've got several of those where I live in Sydney, Northern Beaches. We've got a large tennis centre that's run, that's owned by the council, and it's on a lease to individuals to provide tennis coaching in facilities. We've got most of the aquatic centres are run by private organisations under a lease type arrangement. We also have parliamentary trusts, parliamentary corporations like Victoria Major Events, Green West, and then there are private ownership which eventually reverts to the public. So after, say, 20 years, that facility is donated or handed over to the government or to public ownership at the end of that period. In the meantime, the original sort of funder of it gets the benefit of that in terms of advertising and other things. Now, in terms of advertising and venues, obviously strengths are there's limited competitors, high-profile positions are available, and, you know, it may not be event-specific advertising. It might be something that has nothing to do with the event, but, you know, therefore we can attract all sorts of different sponsors, knowing that there might be 30,000 people there to watch their ad come up on the big screen or along the side of the ground. The weakness, poor venues may offer a cluttered advertising environment, and who's responsible for production of the signage. So again, we've got to decide on that, and it'll have to be approved by both parties. Timing, of course, is any time, and the budget's very variable and depends on the size of the venue. Now, you want to advertise the Melbourne Cricket Ground or Sydney Cricket Ground, you're going to pay a lot. If it's at a local sporting ground, you're probably not going to pay too much to put your sign up along the side of the ground. Advertising for venues, size and fame dependent. Major international venues have TV, radio in conjunction with their events. Smaller venues, they can improve their website search ranking if they try on Google, on venue, billboard advertising, viral and word of mouth using the internet, and social media is a very strong one, of course. Always think of your demographic and the catchment before investing in advertising. So you've got to think of the age group and the gender of the people that you're going after, and you've also got to think about the geography of where those people are coming from to take advantage of what you're offering. The less effective methods of print advertising, unless it's coupon-based, so people get a benefit from that. So just sort of going through these event advertising, the strengths, it enhances the brand by linking it with popular events that customers are passionate about, can generate exposure, both TV and print, worth much more than the initial cost. Major events have a limited pool of advertising, creating high visibility. And it can generate exposure for many years after the actual event through replays. A grand final or something like that would be watched over and over again, and the advertising still remains, during the telecast. And advertising at major events brings exposure at both local and potentially international levels, depending on the sport. If you use it to support a TV ad campaign, it can improve brand recall by up to 1/3. And there's a lot of research goes into these things. If you're advertising at local sporting events, and then you've got also television, not specific to the sport, but just general television advertising of the same thing, it generates much better recall for customers when they're out buying products. The weaknesses, of course, event advertising must be kept simple. Brand identification works best. Brand conflicts with an existing event or venue sponsor. You need to be careful of that. You don't want to upset your existing sponsors. And major events have limited advertising openings and should be booked well in advance. And if you want to play at the big events, you need to have deep pockets and plenty of money. And as they say here, opportunities may arise at a short notice with a budget, $1,000 to $1 million plus, depending on the event or the level of involvement. Personal selling, obviously, we should encourage our staff to on-sell things. We can say, do you want fries with that? But, proper presentation of our staff is a very important part of it. Make the customer feel comfortable and welcome. Provide proper information so that people know where they can get things. I mean, you want an example of this, go to Bunnings. I mean, they just provide a fantastic, I don't know how they do their training of people until that, you're going to ask for a particular widget that's this long and that long, and they'll say, yeah, aisle 7, down on the right-hand side. They just know the store so well. And this is about training your people properly. Provide enough information for the customer so they might feel comfortably making purchase decisions, and motivate them to purchase, give them a reason to purchase. Why do we lose return customers? They feel unemployment, cost outweighs the enjoyment. It costs us $100 to go to a game and we see half an hour and it's over. We're not too happy about that. Dirty facilities, boring food service, poor seating, inconvenient parking and transportation, no luxury seating, no picnic areas, no non-smoking areas, no non-drinking areas, no place to change your young children in nappies, no daycare facilities, no playground for young children, expensive merchandise, food and beverage, and no other entertainment activity itself. So no product extensions, no entertainment before or after the game. Things that annoy us: long delays, service or sales problems that seriously impact on the customer, uncaring or sloppy attitude of the staff, wasted time, failure to listen to our requests, failure to follow customers' instructions, broken promises, financial losses that result from poor service, inability to provide needed answers or information. So we're wandering around, we can't find out where we need to go, impolite staff, and feeling you're a member and a number and not an important customer is an issue. Angry customers. We all need to know how to deal with angry people. First and foremost, you've got to listen to what they say and listen immediately, no delays, and that can deepen customer anger if we don't appear to be listening to what they're saying. If we're uncaring or argumentative, we need to try and move them away. So you've got to define what sort of customer you've got that's got this problem. Are they just an inquisitor, an avenger that wants to get payback, a bureaucrat anxious to catch someone breaking the rules, or a righteous victim? And if you understand them, then you can engage in the listening and trying to find the real issue, what's the problem. Stay calm, try and move them away from the high traffic customer area, get them to come in and sit down in an office or a breakout area so that you can then sit down and start working through the issue. And it may be something that you've caused. And finally, some venue retail operations. So what can we sell at the venue? Well, we can sell food and beverage and parking and premium restaurants and merchandise. Non-sporting events, well, we can have rentals and alternative uses, theatre productions and movie showings and things like that. We can provide a shuttle bus service, vending machines, and general merchandise and what we call fast-moving consumer goods sales. So we can sell other things as well. Got to look at the scope and size that's available to us. Scope of the retail and merchandising opera should directly relate to the attendance capacity. So if you've got a small facility, usually found in front of house or reception, reduces the space and the staffing requirements so we can have people that are normally doing admin work, helping with the retail sales. In medium facilities, we might want to set up a temporary merchandise tent or booth near the entrance. We can also outsource some of this. And in a large operation, we need a dedicated shopfront restaurant locations. And arguably, the dedicated shopfront should be open on a daily basis, 7 days a week, to sell merchandise for people who are supporting our club. Some of the principles: listen to your customers' needs, wants and desires. This is a standard thing in marketing. And to find out what people want, we've got to do some research. Aim your product extensions and offering based upon your target market, so the age and gender and interests of the people that you're going to sell to. And this can change over years, there's no doubt about that. Do your customers benefit from your merchandise offering? So, for instance, selling them a hoodie with your team name on the back. Is it also a good quality hoodie that will keep them warm when they're there in the middle of winter watching a game? So make sure that the products that you sell are of good quality. People don't mind paying a high price for good quality merchandise. I'd be willing to suggest that many of you listening to this tape are wearing expensive sports shoes. Why do you do that when you could go to Kmart and buy a pair of $20 sports shoes? Well, first off, we believe that the sports shoes that you're wearing are better quality and you don't want to damage your feet and your legs when you're training and all the rest of it. But the fact is, we are willing to pay. Nearly all of you have got iPhones or Samsung Galaxies, and that's not the cheapest phone on the market. So people are willing to pay if they think they're getting value. So, you don't have to provide low quality product. People will pay. Is the outlet physically set up to be user friendly and to serve the customers who frequent the venue? So particularly where you've got clothing and things, you may need to have a change room and other things that make it easier for people to try on products and buy them. In terms of food and beverage, more than likely these days to be outsourced, even in the small to medium operations. Obviously a local sporting football club, run their own canteen and everything else. But once you start getting into a permanent facility and with the grandstands and everything else, quite often we might look to outsource that or to give certain people responsibility for it on a profit-based arrangement. Should reflect the venue and its catchment, and you've got to think of the demographics of the people that are attending and their lifestyle choices. Some guidelines for food and beverage: obviously employee appearance is important, some training, maintenance, operation, regulations about food and how it should be served, what temperature should be kept at and other things. Occasionally inspections, patron comforts, safety certification, sanitation, guest relations, professional signs and pricing, decorations, food handlers guidelines. And if you want to learn about this, just go into a fast food outlet like McDonald's or like Subway, because they follow the rules. And globally, they do it very well. both of them got over 30,000 stores around the world. They have standards that they keep to. And if you want to maintain those quality standards and never get into trouble with inspectors and everything else, do what they do and you won't ever be queried. Some of the design flaws: structural non-compliance with food safety laws for heating and cooling of food, cleanliness and everything else. Generally, we get away with local canteens with a barbecue and cooking sausage sandwiches on Saturday afternoon. But once you get into larger venues, you need proper facilities for food preparation and other things. So you need to be careful with this. One of the issues we get oftentimes, of course, is we don't have enough places for people to get food. So we need to make sure we've got them spread around different parts of the ground, and a whole lot of other risks that we take in here about not having provision for exhaust, loading docks and storerooms, long way away from where we need to get the food to, insufficient energy and water availability, so we can't clean up and wash up and everything else, and a lack of wide concourse areas to facilitate traffic flow. In terms of the merchandise outlets and food and beverage, should be conveniently located. Patrons should be able to reach an outlet in 40 to 60 seconds. It's probably a wish list. Well organised with clear indications of where the patrons should line up. Bright, colourful, well-lit and advertising merchandise being offered. Good signage in terms of pricing and other things, and some attention grabbers to get people to come to your outlet. In terms of alcohol management, you need to be very careful with this these days. Most of your staff, all staff serving alcohol should be RSFA qualified, and basically should put all of your staff through it. It's a good qualification to have for you guys. Once you turn 18, you should go out and get it, because it never hurts to have the skills to work in bar work. It pays quite well and everything else, but it's also, you'll learn a lot during the process about the situations of how many beers people should have and everything else. In terms of parking, again, as we mentioned earlier, good source of revenue, and different ways of doing it depending on the ground. Why licensing? Why do we give people a license to use our logo? Well, basically it generates income for us, and it's an important gain, but it also exposes our team to the public. It's interesting, years ago we bought clothing, and the only way you knew what brand it was looking at the label inside the back collar of your shirt. Today, of course, we see Abercrombie and Fitch, and we see Nike, and we see Manchester United and Arsenal and Real Madrid shirts, and we know not only are we paying for the shirt, but then we're continuing to advertise that brand or that club as we wear it around. Should we do this in-house or outsourced? Again, it really depends on the licensing programs that we have and what skills we've got in-house to be able to do this. And we've got to look at what's the potential sales, set a budget, and look at our skill sets where we can do that. And in terms of licensing agreements, we've got all these different issues to deal with: different parties, descriptive marks, compliance, royalty audits, and then maybe, how long we allow these contracts to run before we review them. That's the end of our slides for this session. So session 5 is complete, and now you'll need to make sure that you're starting to work. Hopefully all the individual submissions are now on the system, and hopefully now we can get to the stage where we're working on that last full assignment, which is due at the end of week 6. Talk to you soon. Have a good week.